Morning everybody. Today our topic is joints. Joint joints are present in our body, so which are present in between the two bones. In between the two bones there is a joint. These joints produces the movements. So today we discuss the classification of joints. So see here, this one is a schematic diagram of classification of joints. So joints are mainly classified into mainly two types. Number one is a functional type. So number two is a structural type. So functional type, which means these joints produces the movement. So this movement involves into this functional type. Function means, so there is a working. So there is a joints involves in the function. Then this functional type again classified into three types. Number one is a synarthrosis. Number two is a amphiarthrosis. Number three is a diarthrosis. First we discuss the synarthrosis. Synarthrosis, which means there is a no movement. This type of joints we called as immobile type of joints. So immobile type of joints present in where? In our body? In the cranium. So in the cranial vault they have sutures. That sutures are immobile type. They can't move. That's why called as immobile type. Then come to the amphiarthrosis. Amphiarthrosis, which means there is a little bit movement present in between the joints we called as synarthrosis, amphiarthrosis. So amphiarthrosis, there is a little bit movement present. So these are present in the this type present in the tibia and fibula, inferior end of the tibia and fibula, and inferior end of the radioulnar joint. Then come to the diarthrosis. Diarthrosis, which means there is a free movable joints. These free movable joints we called as diarthrosis. So diarthrosis example is a free movable joints, shoulder joint and hip joint we called as free movable joints. This free movable joints called as diarthrosis. Then see here, whenever we discuss the structural type, so the structural type again classified into three types. Number one is a fibrous type joints, cartilaginous type joints and synovial type joints. Fibrous type, cartilaginous type and synovial type. So fibrous type means there is a fibrous material present in the joint we call as fibrous type. So this fibrous type again classified into three types. Number one is a sutures. Number two is a gymphosis. Number three is a syndesmosis. So first we discuss the fibrous type. This fibrous type, there is a fibrous material present in the fibrous type. The fibrous type divides into three: sutures and gymphosis and syndesmosis. See here is a fibrous connective tissue. In between the two bones there is a fibrous connective tissue. This type we call as fibrous type. In between the two bones there is a cartilaginous plate present. So this type we call as cartilaginous type. So in between the two bones there is a synovial cavity which fills with the synovial fluid. This type of joints we called as synovial type joints. Then in the fibrous type, first we discuss the suture. Suture means, see here, so this one is a frontal bone as a parietal bone. In between the frontal and parietal bone we have suture like this. So in between the two bones there is a suture. This suture is made up of fibrous type. So the sutures are again classified into, number one is a plain suture. Plain suture, see here, between the two bones there is a fibrous material present. So this type we call as plain type. Then second one is a serrate suture. Serrate suture is a irregular in shape, zigzag manner. So between the two bones there is a zigzag manner type. In zigzag manner suture we called as serrate suture. Then denticulate suture. So there is a dents present here, is a dent. Dent means teeth. So teeth like structures projects towards another bone. So this type we called as denticulate type. Then come to the squamous suture. Squamous suture, which means the flat. So we are already discussed that squamous epithelium. So squamous epithelium there is a flat tapering ends like that. Same, squamous means flat suture. This suture we called as squamous suture. Then come to the syndesmosis. So here we are already discussed here. So see here the sutures completed. Then syndesmosis. So the syndesmosis, in between the two bones there is a strong interosseous ligament present. In between the two bones there is a strong interosseous ligament present. So this type we called as syndesmosis type. See here, example is a interosseous ligament between the two bones. Example is suppose we take the radius and ulna. In between the radius and ulna we have interosseous membrane. So this joint we called as intermediate radio-ulnar joint. Intermediate radio-ulnar joint, there is an involvement of interosseous ligament. Same way, whenever we discuss the inferior ends of the tibiofibular joint, inferior end of the tibio and fibular joint, so we have strong interosseous ligament. This strong interosseous ligament present in the near the lower end of the tibiofibular joint. Then these two are examples of the syndesmosis type. Then followed by the gymphosis. Gymphosis type, there is a peg and socket variety type. It is a peg and socket. See here, this is a peg and socket type variety. Example is teeth sockets. Teeth sockets present in the upper jaw and lower jaw of the upper jaw and lower jaw. See here, there is a alveolar bone, or the upper jaw, this bone we called as maxilla. The lower jaw, this bone we called as mandible. So see here, this one is a socket. as a teeth. Teeth is forms it enters into the socket, then forms the gamphosis type. So this type also called as peg and socket variety. So is a ligament between the bone and teeth. There is a ligament. This ligament called as preodental ligament. Preodental ligament present here. So this type we called as gamphosis. The gamphosis example is a teeth socket and between the teeth and mandible, upper jaw and lower jaw. Then come to the cartilaginous type. See here, fibrous type is completed. Then come to the cartilaginous type. So this cartilaginous type again subdivides into two types. Number one is primary cartilaginous joints. Number two is secondary cartilaginous joints. So is a primary and this one is a secondary. So first we discuss the primary. See here is a primary. There is any long bone in between the diaphysis and epiphysis. There is a cartilaginous plate. So which type it is? Cartilaginous type. So that's why whenever we look the long bone in between the diaphysis and epiphysis, we have cartilaginous plate. So this type of joints we called as primary cartilaginous type and also called as sychondrosis. See here the sychondrosis. This chondro which means cartilage. Sychondrosis joints we called as primary cartilaginous joints. Examples: long bones in between the epiphyseous and diaphyseal ends. Then the primary cartilaginous type and the secondary cartilaginous type. So this type bones are united together by the hyaline cartilage. So already we already see that. Then is a immovable, they can't move. Is a temporary joint. So after age it is disappears. So this cartilage is disappears. Rarely it is occur in the midline. Then come to the secondary cartilaginous type. The second cartilaginous type of joints we called as symphysis type. So this one is a schematic diagram of the symphysis type. In between the two bones there is a fibrous cartilage present here. Then hyaline cartilage present here. Hyaline and fibrous cartilage present to form a joint called as symphysis joint. Example of the symphysis joint is a pubic symphysis. Pubic symphysis is an example. Then come to the synovial type. Synovial type is a plain type. Synovial type again classified into plain type, uniaxial type, biaxial type and multiaxial type. So plain type, uniaxial type, biaxial type and multiaxial type. So plane type joints present in the plane type. So is a plane joints. These plane joints present where the intercarpal joints. In between the two carpals we have plane joint. In between the intertarsals we have plane joints. Then come to the uniaxial type. So uniaxial type joints again divides into two types. Number one is a hinge type and number two is a pivot type. Hinge type and pivot type. See here, this one is a plane type of joint. In between the carpals, we have plane type. Then hinge type is involves in the, there is an involvement of only one axis present. So that's why this type we called as uniaxial type. The uniaxial type again classified into two, hinge type and pivot type. So uniaxis, which means there is only one axis. Whenever we done the flexion of forearm, so is a flexion of forearm. Near the flexion of forearm, so this joint is a elbow joint. Near the elbow joint there is a passing of one transverse axis. There is that's why it is runs towards the body size, means flexion. In the flexion and extension, in between these two movements there is a one axis present. That axis we called as transverse axis. So the transverse axis present in the hinge joint. And see here, pivot type joint example is pivot type joint example, atlantoaxial joint. So this is a atlas and this one is a axis. Atlas means C1 vertebrae, axis means the C2 vertebrae. In between the C1 and C2 we have joint. That joint type we called as pivot type joint. So this also same uniaxial type joint. Then come to the biaxial type. So biaxial type divides into, bi means two axes present here. The uniaxial type there is only one axis. The hinge type there is a passing of transverse axis. The pivot type there is a passing of vertical axis. Then come to the biaxial. So this biaxial type again subdivides into three types. Number one is a ellipsoid type, number two is a condylar type and saddle type. See here, ellipsoid type. So this one is a ellipsoid type. So metacarpophalangeal joint. Example is a metacarpophalangeal joint. So this is a metacarpal and this is a phalanx. So here there is a joint. This joint we called as ellipsoidal type. See here, ellipsoidal type joint. So there is a two axis passes here, ellipsoidal type. So number one is a transverse axis and number two is a anterior-posterior axis. Two axes passes through this ellipsoidal type. So all of you draw this diagram, is a very important. Is a ellipsoidal joint. Then come to the condylar type. Condylar type means the condyle is a round surface called as mandible head of the mandible. It is a condyle. So this condyle is articulates with the articular surface socket of the temporal bone called as TM joint, temporomandibular joint. Example is a temporomandibular joint. Condylar type example is a temporomandibular joint. Okay, so this temporomandibular joint present in between the temporal bone and mandible bone. Temporal bone and mandible bone, there is a joint called as temporomandibular joint. So there is a two axis passes here. So number one is a transverse axis and number two is a antero-posterior axis. Antero-posterior axis. Okay. Next, we discuss the multiaxial type. See here, multiaxial type joints. There is a two or more axes present in the multiaxial type. Two or more movements present in the multiaxial type. Example